Like moths to a flame, you've thrown caution to the wind for a glimpse into our world. Well, now you're in it.
Welcome to Effed Up Stories.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight we have another user submission. It comes from Robert Trumbull. He submitted it on May 31st, 2015. It's relatively new. It's a story that involves his psychic ability. Actually, the story has a lot of interesting aspects to it that involves time travel, or I guess going into a dimension outside of time. And if that's up your alley, it's going to be for an interesting story. Before we jump into it, we want your stories, your effed up stories. If it's on the paranormal, and of course we want your pictures and your video. If you have those, we ask that you submit that to us at our official website, which is effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. I'll get it on the website, and most likely it will get in a podcast because we are making an effort to get every submission that we've ever gotten and ever will get into a podcast. So get your story out there. And on that note, I'm sorry to be so relentless with this, but I really want to get those stories from you guys on near-death experiences and on phantom phone calls. I'm going to be doing podcasts on those very soon. If you got your stories, I want to get them out there. And remember, even if you don't have a story yourself, you can help. Post it on your Facebook, post it on your Twitter, post it on your Google+. Somebody that you have in your list might have a perfect story that nobody's ever heard. They just need to know where to send it. So get that out there, and we'll get the story and put it out so you can hear it. And with that said, to the story of tonight. By the way, the original story is called Psychic Showdown on the website if you want to read it. And again, it comes from Robert Trumbull, and it came in on May 31st. So anyway, by his own admission, Robert has had a lifetime of paranormal activity. He's had contact with aliens, with ghosts, with angels, all kinds of paranormal phenomenon. And, you know, he knows that this sounds really out there, and I think that by the time we get through this story, it's pretty fantastical. You may have a hard time believing that. He understands that, but he says it's true, so just listen to it and take it for what it is and make up your own mind. So for a little bit of background on Robert, he has what he calls a gift. Okay, he's had it since his preteens, and he said he was taken by aliens. And ever since this happened, he's had this ability to, I guess, a psychic ability. He could read minds. He can get a sense of people. And this story took place one night when he was at a friend of a friend's home. He said he was living outside of Chicago, and he just had started to date this attractive young lady from Brazil, and she found his gift very interesting. She had a lot of fun, asking him questions about the past and about the future. He said that he's so accurate that he could tell within an hour or so of what's going to happen to people, except, of course, to himself. But anyway, so, she would ask him these questions, and he was more than delighted to answer. So anyway, he doesn't give her real name. He gives a fictitious name. Her name in this story is Mary, okay? So he arrives at Mary's house, and when he gets there, she tells him that, she's arranged for this special meetup, okay? Doesn't really tell him anything about it. Kind of leaves it to him to figure out on his own. But the meeting is going to happen in Chicago with someone that she refers to as a special person. So on the way to this place, he asks her, why she was being so coy. What was the deal? What is she hiding? And he elaborates to say that people, if they really don't want him to read his mind, they can block him. But anyway, he couldn't read her. She wouldn't say anything, and he finally arrives, and it's at this big 3-story brownstone home, and there's a party going on. And he said that he has difficulty with parties because as a psychic person and an empath, that's actually something that he says as well. He can feel the emotion and the inner mood and things of people that are around him. So when he's in a big room full of all these different people, of course, he finds it very chaotic. So anyway, as he enters, he's announced. It's announced that he's there, and he thought that this was strange. And he said he got the idea that when he showed up, that he was somewhat of a guest of honor. They were expecting him. It was a setup, but I guess not against him, but it was kind of evolved, like the whole thing was made up for him. So he asks Mary, what's the big idea? What's this all about? And she tells him that she told people of her church, and I can see how this would be pretty nasty. She tells people of her church that she thinks he's possessed by a demon, okay? Never mind the fact that he like reads her, does all this reading for her, and like she enjoys it. Maybe she thought that only a demon could do this, but she had her suspicions anyway, because he said he had to repeatedly assure her that he was not possessed by a demon, and that he's been tested in the past. I don't know what kind of a test that would be, but anyway. So Mary was a member of one of these, how he puts it, a shopping center church, which he says, the type of church, I guess this is sarcasm, the church of the rising toenail, right? So, one of these out to lunch churches is what I got from it. But anyway, she introduces him to the hostess, who was an older woman, and he said very much, fit the image of a scary witch, right? And she told, Mary told Robert that this woman's name was Jenny Beth, and she was a prophet that had direct contact with God, okay, or the Creator, is how he put it. And so Robert tried, he read her, and he said as soon as he started, psychically reading her, he instantly felt this slight connection to the universal thread. And he asks her, in which way, like how does she actually communicate with the Creator? And she said that she would be given a vision. And then right after this, she starts to shake. And in quotes, she says, "Out demon, leave this body." And Robert's confused. He doesn't feel any evil near where they are. He doesn't really know what she's going on about. And he said, there's 12 other people at the party, at least, and they get all quiet. They grab cushions and pillows. They set up, this is a show for them. It's just as well they got popcorn. They sat on the floor around, and, he said that they all start to pray. And Mary told him to sit down on this chair, which he described kind of like a throne that was facing Jenny Beth. And she was sitting in one of these chairs. So it's almost like these two thrones are facing one another as if it's a showdown. And that's kind of how he describes this event. So they're both sitting in these thrones across from one another, and the rest of the room is circled around watching what's about to unfold.
Like some kind of spiritual standoff.
A spiritual standoff. That's exactly the way that he describes this. So Jenny Beth, the woman sitting across from him in the chair, she starts humming and she's shaking. And she's making all these weird pushing gestures with her hands. And so Robert said, and like maybe Ryan, you're more familiar with this kind of lingo, but he said he had to put on a spiritual armor. Okay?
Yeah. So the idea of just, kind of focusing, centering yourself, and generally visualize some kind of protective light or barrier between you and any other outside spiritual influences.
Okay, so that's what he's doing. Okay, and he while he's doing this, he very quickly decided to read the people around him. I guess to get a sense of what was actually, what was the consensus of the people around him. And he said he learned a very good technique to protect himself from, the evil powers of the spiritual plane. And he said he instantly understood what was happening and what was going to happen from this point on during this encounter. He said Jenny Beth was, she was convinced, she was there. Her whole purpose was to free him from this demon she really did believe was possessing him, but he was sure that wasn't. It was a lost cause as far as he was concerned. Her intentions were good, but it really wasn't needed, we'll say. But anyway, she started her process. She started by asking him his name. And he made a special note to say that, having been a demonologist interrogator, he knows these questions that she's going to ask. Like it's common, I guess, questions that an interrogator would ask someone who's possessed. So he tells her his Christian name, and she asks him again. This time demanding, as you've always, you've all heard and seen in demonic possessions, demanding for the demon's name. And once again, he tells her his name. So she tries again. And he said by then, because during this whole process, he's reading her and trying to really understand everything that's going through her head. And he said that as he did this, she decided to change the questions and asked him if, he could tell her what, he had for breakfast. And he said, he could see this before the words even left her mouth. And he just instantly said, toast and orange juice. So then she started to question him about the people and events that, he shouldn't have any awareness of, right? And he was answering all these questions, somewhat with difficulty, but answering regardless. And he said again, like when he opens himself to the spirit realm, he has to sort through like the person's information, which can be difficult. I guess you're getting different answers, and like anyone who's gone to a medium, you'll often hear them say, does somebody know someone who's deceased with the name Melissa? And like, it might not be you, but it could be someone else in the room, because they're getting answers from all different kinds of spirits. And I think that's what he's getting at here. So anyway, she's asking these questions, and, he's answering them. And he said, as this is going on, it's almost like the area around them changes. They become enclosed in this very dark tunnel. She's at one end, he's at the other. And on either side of them, he said there's these pulsating lights. And these are the lights of the other people at the party. He said the air got very thick, kind of like a fog, but very, very heavy. He said their breath was visible, and I can see you guys right now saying that this is just like the movies, but this is how he said it happened. And he said when he started to speak as this was happening, it was like it came out in slow motion. And when she spoke, it came out faster. So he was speaking and it was like slowed down and it was a lower pitch. And when she would speak, it was sped up and it was in a higher pitch, which he described as like Mickey Mouse. So then we have these questions. Jenny Beth asks, "What is your name?" He gives his Christian name. She asks, "How did you get here?" And he says, "To the party, I drove. To this plane, you took me here." She asks, "Where are you?" He says, "At your home and in between." She asks, "Why are you here?" He says, "I was invited." And she asks, "Who did you bring with you?" And he says, "My girlfriend." But then he said, as he's going through these questions, he suddenly feels this pulling at his right shoulder. And he said it felt like a small hand reaching over his shoulder and pulling him to the right. And he instinctively reached across with his left hand and touched it. This was not a human hand. He said it was a very hard, three-fingered, clawed hand. It wasn't real large, but he said it was very powerful. And he said his spirit armor was protecting him from being scratched. Jenny Beth started screaming, and she pointed at him, and he's screaming like, "I told you there was a demon." And so he called on his spirit guide, and I know this sounds a little foreign to you, but he said he met his spirit guide when he was in his late teens, lost him and found him again in his 30s. I think this was actually taught to him by his grandfather. In fact, this spirit guide he has right now in the story, he said, is his grandfather.
His great-grandfather.
His great-grandfather, yeah. He said that, his great-grandfather was the story keeper for his clan. And he is from the Mohawk Nation. So anyway, he sees the creature and, he does what he's practiced. He removes it forcefully from his back. And there's these loud screams, shrieks, the tunnel shaking. And more of his protectors arrive to push the demon down. So this is his grandfather protecting him, and they're, I guess, tribe protectors. They come out to push this demon down and protect him. So now Robert starts to question her. And this is an interesting note. He said that he actually learned to be a demonologist by studying with Ed and Lorraine Warren in New England. That's pretty significant, if true. So Robert starts.
And for any of you out there who don't recognize the name Ed and Lorraine, they were, probably one of their most popular things was the Annabelle doll. If you go look that up, there's a whole movie on it. Anyway.
Yeah, and The Conjuring before that.
Yeah.
So in any case, he starts to ask her questions, and he said he demanded the demon name. And instead of getting a name, he's hearing growls and howls. So he centers his energy, and he throws this intense light onto her, and he demands again, asks for its name, and it cries out and laughs and says, and I quote, "Your pathetic light does not harm me, monkey." So he goes the extra mile. He calls upon the light of the universal power to pour onto this thing. And then the screams are coming out of it again. "How did you do that? It hurts. Make it stop. I will leave this place. I will leave your energy. Stop the pain." And he asks its name. And it tells him. It doesn't tell us, but it tells him. He asks it where it came from. And it tells him this information again. And he doesn't tell us. But yes, he does. Sorry. He just says, this is kind of vague, but he says, it's a being from another place and time. And just to throw it into an easy understandable thing, it's from a different dimension, okay? So anyway.
So if this guy, is a real demonologist, there is an actual practical reason for not putting the name there. Because names have power. And for anybody who studies demonology, and I mean, I studied it for years and years and years. One of the things that is really grilled into you is, you don't sit there repeating the name of some foul entity over and over and over and over again in your mind or out loud. You don't write it down. You let the information exist in the back of your mind, but you don't constantly call upon it, because using the name, writing the name, spreading the name for others just creates more links for people to draw these entities to them.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I should have thought of that more. But I remember not only you telling me that, and even just to have a psychic link with a demon is a big deal, right? But this is especially true, of course, if you're doing rituals and stuff like that. Names are very, very powerful. So yeah, it actually makes total sense that he wouldn't put them there. So getting back to what's going on here, Jenny Beth, he said that they're locked into this energy struggle, and he tells her to basically stop messing with things that she's ignorant of, right? I mean, she's out of her league. She doesn't really know what she's dealing with, and he tells her that the whole reason that this demon even came here was because of her energy pulling off of the universal energy thread. It was her messing around here, dabbling, as they say. And he tells her to, release him from this, plane that she had pulled him in. Because remember, they're still locked in this, I guess, a bubble of time. And, just to stop this, let him go, stop making trouble. And she's really scared, right? And she doesn't really understand what he's trying to say. And she doesn't even understand, what she did to cause this. Only that, of all the times that she's attempted this kind of thing, this is the first time something like this had happened. And, again, like he's trying to explain to her how to do this. And, eventually she does free this bubble so that they can leave. And this is a really interesting turn, is that as he comes out of it, as they come out of this bubble, he realizes that time did not move. He said that the people who are sitting around watching this, they're still in the middle of their words. The clock has stopped. He said he can feel the air around him rushing in on him. He said it, as he described it, it was kind of like being in a rowboat that suddenly starts to sink and the water is rushing in around you, but you can breathe, right? And he said when time had started up again, because time had apparently stopped, when it started up again, he said everybody was talking at once. And he had to block them out, right? Because remember, he's an empath. He's able to feel everything that everybody around is giving off, all those vibes. And he just told his date, Mary, he needed to go home. He needed to get out of there. And, he never went back to Jenny Beth's house, and he ended up breaking up with Mary, understandably.
Yeah.
It's not a really good date night, right? I mean, by the way, what are we doing tonight? Well, I felt like you might enjoy being exercised. I hear it's pretty popular out in the third world countries. No, but so it's I get it, right? So anyway, he knows it sounds crazy. I know you guys think it sounds crazy, and you know what? It sounds crazy, but he says it's true. And he admits he's had a truly strange life. He said he's been tested by the University of Chicago and the Mental Health Society of Chicago and have found to be a true and genuine gifted empath. Okay? He shared his encounter. Actually, he has some other stories on my site if you want to read it too. He's got one there with Bigfoot. He's got one there with Shadow Men. Again, like people who have paranormal experiences, they usually have a lot, and it's not isolated into one area. It's never just a ghost or just an alien. Most people have their lives pepper throughout with all these different kinds of phenomenon, and I don't know if that's because you're just open to it. I really don't know what the answer is.
And we have a a laundry list of examples of that of people that we've done podcasts with and interviews with, who have told us a whole myriad of stories, not just this one experience.
Well, that's just it, right? I mean, we've had the site going now for 3 years or something like that, and of all the time that we've had this site open, that's what I've noticed is that most of our submitters have submitted several stories, like at least 2 or 3, right? I mean, I just find that is the general consensus from everybody who sends us stories. And it's cool. It's really cool. For someone who's interested in it, I find it interesting to read, even if it was traumatic for the for the individual. But it is an interesting point that people who have these experiences usually have multiple, and it's all throughout. So I know it sounds fantastic and stuff like that, but I that's the story.
I will make a couple of points. I mean, if this guy's a true demonologist, and I mean, the very first thing, of course, when somebody says they're a demonologist or they've studied demonology, of course, I always get a little skeptical, and I don't know, maybe a little territorial, because I studied this stuff, and let's face it, I wasn't just a demonologist. I was a full-on Satanist for a long time. And, I very much sunk myself into this world in a big way. It was very much a large part of my life. So whenever I read or hear stories of people talking about their experiences with demonology, of course, there's always certain key things that I look for. Of course, I already mentioned the fact that, he didn't give any information as to who this demon or this entity, I don't even like using the word demon, because it immediately connects a specific entity to, Christianity. And I mean, it's just, it's not that black and white. I mean, Christianity came along long after there were evil spirits. It's not just heaven and hell. There's a whole other, collage, if you will, of places in between, up, down, back, forward. There's what's the line from H.P. Lovecraft? Man was born amidst a placid isle of ignorance, and it was never meant that he should journey far.
I love Lovecraft.
Oh, indeed.
But I get what you're saying. Like, I mean, you get to look at it through a special lens because, you have experience and knowledge on it. So, you're...
And I will say that there are several things, the whole idea where he talks about the fog and the heaviness. I mean, we've experienced that together on what we refer to as the Lost Highway.
Oh, yeah.
It's a physical oppressiveness. And, for anybody who delves deep into the paranormal, there does appear to be a layering of realities. And at any given point in time, it does seem to be possible under certain circumstances to slip into these other realities, which the word is coterminous. These realities are coterminous with our own. Well, and we see this with the Jinn and many other topics. And then you get the whole time dilation. The spirit realm, works on a different scale. Well, when communication is happening, especially between two individuals on a realm that might be slightly out of phase, you could have it's like a dream. Could have hours and hours and hours and hours worth of experiences in a dream, and wake up and realize that you've only been asleep for 15 minutes.
Well, one of the main things that you will find in near-death experiences from tons of these, they almost all say time does not exist. Mm-hmm. Once they go over. And, we have out-of-body experiences. And again, that's kind of what this sounded like to a degree. They weren't in the normal Earthern realm, and time did not exist. And, I guess what I'm trying to say, Ryan, because every story that we do, I approached them with an open mind. I enjoyed reading it. I allow for the possibility of everything to exist. Everything that we ever do on our show, I allow for that possibility for it to exist. But I do know when I'm reading it, depending on just how extreme it is, I kind of got an idea of what I'm expecting from the public.
Yes.
And so I get that.
Oh, there's going to be with a story like this, there's going to be a high level of oh geez. I can't even formulate the word here. People will be incredulous, right? They're going to be very opposed to just lapping this up because it is rather theatrical.
It is, and all I'm asking people to do is to open their mind to the possibility of it. I'm not asking anybody to believe it. I mean, let's face it, you're going to believe it or you're not, right? But just approach it and give it the possibility to exist and take it for what it is.
Because if you've never been in that particular situation, you have no lens of experience. And I mean, I'm not saying that I believe this 100% myself, but there are certain things in this guy's story, it's almost, it's almost like there's little hidden truths in there. It's like how the police will only release so much information about a crime, and then somebody comes and says they know how it was committed or they know the person who did it, and they give details that the police never released. I mean, he didn't in anywhere there say that I'm not going to put the name of this demon in here because it's going to encourage people to call upon him.
You just picked up on it.
It was one of those things that like he very artfully skirted around that, but for anybody who's spent any time studying demonology, especially 10-12 years of their life like I did, it certainly stands out to me. And again, the tunnel, the oppressiveness, the feeling of time dilation, which can also be described as hypercommunication, the ability to communicate large amounts of information with another individual in a different way that happens way faster than so fast that it seems like time around you has stood still.
You know what? And that's another thing in near-death experiences. When people say like they see a loved one or whatever, and they're just communicated a ton of information, and they just instantly know it, right? And it's clearer than words, but no words are spoken, right? So, I hope you guys enjoyed that story, and again, thank you, Robert, for submitting it. Again, we're going to be covering a lot more user submissions, so we'd like to hear from you. If you have a story, get that to us at the official website. It's effedupstories.com, EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. Particularly interested in near-death experience stories and phantom phone calls, because we're going to be doing a podcast on those things very soon. If you want to get it in those podcasts coming up, get them into us ASAP. Get this stuff on your social media, get it out there, because you never know who's going to have those stories. And if you get it out there, we might get it and be able to put it in a show so you can listen to it. So with that having been said, I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and I hope you'll tune in next time.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Have a fantastic evening.
Like moths to a flame, you've thrown caution to the wind for a glimpse into our world. Well, now you're in it.
Welcome to Effed Up Stories.
nobody's ever heard. They just need to know where to send it. So get that out there, and we'll get the story and put it out so you can hear it. And with that said, to the story of tonight. By the way, the original story is called Psychic Showdown on the website if you want to read it. And again, it comes from Robert Trumbull. And it came in on May 31st. So anyway, by his own admission, Robert has had a lifetime of paranormal activity. He's had contact with aliens, with ghosts, with angels, all kinds of paranormal phenomenon. And, you know, he knows that this sounds really out there. And I think that by the time we get through this story, it's pretty fantastical. You may have a hard time believing that. He understands that. But he says it's true. So just listen to it and take it for what it is and make up your own mind. So for a little bit of background on Robert, he has what he calls a gift. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight we have another user submission. It comes from Robert Trumbull. He submitted it on May 31st, 2015. It's relatively new. It's a story that involves his psychic ability. Actually, the story has a lot of interesting aspects to it that involves time travel, or I guess going into a dimension outside of time. And if that's up your alley, it's going to be for he's had it since his preteens. And he said he was taken by aliens. And ever since this happened, he's had this ability to, I guess a psychic ability. He could read minds. He can get a sense of people. And this story took place one night when he was at a friend of a friend's home. He said he was living outside of Chicago, and he just had started to date this attractive young lady from Brazil, and she found his gift very interesting. She had a lot of fun, asking him questions about the past and about the future. He said that he's so accurate that he could tell within an hour or so of what's going to happen to people, except, of course, to himself. But anyway, so, she would ask him these questions, and he was more than delighted to answer. So anyway, he doesn't give her real name. He gives a fictitious name. Her name in this story is Mary, okay? So he arrives at Mary's house. Interesting story. Before we jump into it, we want your stories, your effed up stories. If it's on the paranormal, and of course we want your pictures and your video. If you have those, we ask that you submit that to us at our official website, which is effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. I'll get it on the website, and most likely it will get in a podcast because we are making an effort to get every submission that we've ever gotten and ever will get into a podcast. So get your story out there. And on that note, I'm sorry to be so relentless with this, but I really want to get those stories from you guys on near-death experiences and on phantom phone calls. I'm going to be doing podcasts on those very soon. If you got your stories, I want to get them out there. And remember, even if you don't have a story yourself, you can help. Post it on your Facebook, post it on your Twitter, post it on your Google+. Somebody that you have in your list might have a perfect story